All right, back at the bench, part 2 of the reloading. Okay, now I gotta measure out my grains real quick to make sure I get an accurate reading on my grains. Let me calibrate my scales real quick. Pass. All right. Alrighty. I have a kind of a dummy shell loaded. That way I can just measure, put it in my scales, and go from there, zero it out. All right, let's see where we're at. We're looking for 22.3. It's 22.1. Let's try another pull real quick and see. Sometimes you gotta give it a second to drop all the grains down into the shell. Okay. See where we're at now. 22.2, that's close enough. I kind of go in the middle according to the book on grainage. So I kind of go right in the middle. Not too hot, not too mild. And I use a Lehman set scales. It's a pretty nice little pocket scale you can take with you if you need to. It comes with a neat little 100 grain weight to calibrate it. Okay, we are ready to start loading. Let me zing it back around to number 1 position. I've already, you seen in the first video, I already prepped all my shells. I lubed them. I made sure all the primer holes were smooth bored out. I checked the casings for damage. So now I'm just ready to start loading. I've already lubed up my dies and made sure that they're all ready to go. I put my primers in by hand because it's just easier for me to do so. Some people have little contraptions to put the primers in, or they use a little thing that comes with the press, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. I'm just comfortable with putting it by hand. All the way down. The primer is in. I used my Hornby 22 cal bullets. I really do like those. I put my tip in there. I've already got it all pre-measured out for the cartridge overall length where I need to be. I'll pull it out and I'll inspect it. Different reloaders have different ideals on, or different methods to how deep down they want it. I go by the book. It tells me cartridge overall length is like 2.16, and that's where mine's at. The canaloo on mine is just where you can barely see it. So when I crimp it, I put a light crimp on it. Just a light one where you can just barely see the end of it. If you take a shell that's already been shot and look, you can see that how light of a crimp I put on these. I don't put a very heavy crimp on them. Some guys like them really crimped down tight, some guys don't. So I don't particularly want it over crimped because, you know, it just doesn't work for my application. Take another primer, put it in there. And since I deburred all the priming slots, it works out fantastic for me. Give it a second to drop all the powder. And it's just like a light crimp. Some guys like to leave a little bit of oil on their shelling or their cases or their cartridges. I like to wipe it off. Then I just kind of inspect it and make sure it all went the way it's supposed to. All my brass has already been lubed on the ends, both the ends, and rolled in the case lube so it doesn't get stuck in my resizing die. All the way down, back up. Next station. There you go. Always kind of just inspect them and make sure that everything went down as far as they're supposed to, and I just check them. On the powder measuring, people are different reloaders load them differently. Some of them have a scale that's already been pre-measured, or mine's on the press. I haven't got that far yet. I personally felt like you should start basic. You know, if you needed to use the cup measurer, you could measure it out and load individually as that, or you can get as advanced as a machine that everything's already pre-measured. I wanted to learn the basics first before I advanced up into different stages of reloading. And this is just, I'm comfortable here. This works for my application. And once you get the odds and ends of it going, and you kind of get a feel for it, and you figure it out, you can literally burn through them really quick. You can just start reloading really, really fast once you get doing it. But you don't want to go too fast. You want to make sure you check your work, because you don't want to make a mistake and not know it until you fire it from your gun. So you always want to recheck all of your stuff as you go along. Every so many shells I'll check, and I just kind of inspect them. Make sure that the shell's dropping where it needs to be dropping at. And make sure the primer went in flush. And it's just, you just double check your work. You can't be too safe on it. You always want to make sure and be safe. It's too easy to hit autopilot and make a mistake and not know it until you know it. And since I don't go do a lot of competition shooting or competition anything, it's just a hobby for me. I don't have to load 1,000 rounds a day because my son doesn't shoot 1,000 rounds a day. We go shooting on the weekends when we have time, and it's just a good hobby to have. It's a hobby that most people don't know about anymore. You know, back in the day, guys would load their own ammunition before they would go hunting, and it just, we should keep this alive. We should keep reloading up and running with our families and teach it to our kids, because it's something that's good to know if you ever need it. My grandfather showed me years and years ago, and I remember watching him as a child, in his basement long years ago, reloading ammunition. It was really, really cool. And that's where we're at. know Lee makes some other presses that hold the bullets, that hold the cases, that holds everything, and all you literally have to do is sit here and just work the control, and it just continues to feed through around, and a shell drops, the prime or the powder drops, the projectile drops, and it crimps. I mean, and all you gotta do is sit there and just pull your handle like a slot machine, and that works for some people. You know, if you are needing to make a lot of rounds really fast when you get that advanced, then that's good. You get that far, you can move right along. I haven't got that far, and I don't know if I will. I really enjoy doing it the way I'm doing it. It works really well for me. You know, I usually sit down here and I'll make about 50 rounds, and I'll stop because like I said, it just gives me something to do when my wife is busy or my family's doing something. I can sit down here and make rounds, and it just gives me something to do. My wife must need something. She keeps coming down here. I'll find out what she needs in a minute. Okay, now I'm going to show you how fast you could do it when you just start with it, and it just you range it around and cycle it through all those stations. Go up, primer, down, up, down, up. That quick. Once you get the hang of it and you get comfortable with your machine, you can put out a bunch of rounds pretty quick if you wanted to. I taught my son how to reload ammunition, and he loves it. He'll sit down here and he'll make 9mm rounds or 380 rounds, and he just enjoys it, you know. He said all of his friends wish that they knew how to do that, and well, I would show them, but I don't want to step on anybody's toes with their parents. So I teach my son, and it's something he can learn. Then one day he can teach his kids when he has them. Let's inspect this one. I'll get my mic out real quick, and I'll measure the cartridge overall length real fast, and we'll see where we're at. Okay. We'll get the book out real quick, give it a look. 2.21 with a 5 to 2.21 with a 6. .21 with a 6. So I got my crimping right where it needs to be. So that's where that was supposed to go. So that's good. I mean, that means I've got my machine set up right. I got all my dies calibrated right. And when it's all calibrated right and it's doing what it's supposed to, it makes it flawless. It just goes. You always want to check though. You never want to just assume that everything's as good as it's supposed to be. You always want to make sure. You always check. And like I said, once you get into it, you can just really hum through some rounds making them. And once you get comfortable with it, you want to check about every 5, maybe every 10 rounds, you want to check it. That way you stay on top of, that way you can catch anything if your machine's not doing what it's supposed to do. I've said before, it's just a hobby. I'm not a professional by any means. It's just a hobby. I'm not sponsored by any of these products, Lee or anybody. When I started reloading, I wish I could have found something on the internet that would just self-explained, is just broke it down as easy as possible to learn how to do this without having to ask so many different people. There were just, well, to me, there wasn't enough videos online to show me what I needed to know. And it's kind of discouraging at first because I couldn't find nothing. And I wish I could have found something, because it'd have been so much easier for me if I could have found somebody that did it, or found a page that was really user friendly. And I couldn't find that. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment and I will check the comments and try to answer your questions the best that I can. What powder I use, what primers I use, what case lube I use. I'll try to be as helpful as I can with anything I can help you with. Because when you're first starting out, the more help you could get learning, the less discouraged you'll be when you start your reloading journey and you get into this hobby. I have a feeling a lot of reloaders, new guys, start out with this and they can't figure it out, or they can't find the help that they need to have questions answered, and they get discouraged and they don't do it. I went to my local reload shop here in town that sells ammunition, guns, and reloading stuff, and one of those guys knew how to reload at all. They sell the reloading stuff, but they didn't know how to reload. They sold the machine, but they didn't know how to work the machine. So it wasn't very helpful for me to go to them and ask. They could tell me what stuff I needed, they just couldn't tell me how to do it. So I bought a book. When I bought a book, I read the book, I watched a lot of videos, I watched a lot of different reloading channels, a lot of gun channels, just whatever I could find, because I wanted to make sure that I did this right, because my son shoots these bullets with me, and I wanted to make sure I was doing it right before we started shooting, because I didn't want my son to get hurt, or myself. You can replace a gun, can't replace fingers. Now, as far as it cheaper to reload than it is to buy reloaded rounds, it depends on where you live, what part of the country you're in. I can't answer that question completely because I don't know. But if you're shooting in bulk, you can buy a whole bag of brass ready to go. It's ready to be reloaded for $22.99 for 100 rounds. So I know a box of 20 is like $15 at our ammo store. So it's not cheaper for us to do it that way. if my son wants to shoot 90, 100 rounds out of the AR, well, 20 times that, $15 a box of 20, I can buy 100 rounds of cleaned, tumbled, dried, deburred cases for $223,556 for $22.99. I could buy the powder. I think it's like $36 for a pound. These are $14, and I got 100 rounds. These are 10. So I get 100 rounds for about $70, somewhere in that ballpark, and then I can make 100 rounds of ammunition that I know that's been loaded right, crimped right, everything. I know everything about that bullet because I made it. I don't have to worry about somebody else that didn't know what they were doing or a machine that malfunctioned. We went to the store and bought, at this reloading shop, he had a whole box of ammunition, like 500,000 rounds that he had purchased during COVID because ammunitions were hard to come by. He bought all these rounds and the machine malfunctioned, and some of the 9mm rounds would be way overloaded and some had no powder at all. So the machine malfunctioned and you wouldn't know how much powder was in the cases until you took them apart. So we'd buy 100 rounds for $10, come home, take them apart with our tool that we have that takes them apart with. I'd put the powder in its own container. I'd separated the rounds. Then I got the book, read the instructions on how much grains to put in them. I rechanged all my stuff over to 9mm, and I made probably 1,000 rounds of 9mm that I had to take apart and put back together the right way for $10. That's all it cost me, and I got probably 500 to 1,000 rounds that way. That was a really super good deal. My son sat down here and he would take them apart, and then after we got so many took apart, we'd set up the machine here for the dies of 9mm. Then we set it all up, got it ready to go. Then we sat down here and we'd load 500 rounds or so for way cheaper than what you could buy those rounds at the store. All about the same. I was told that sometimes these grain droppers that go on top of these Lee presses, sometimes that you have to check them occasionally. I have not had any issues with mine. It may be a point of a grain off. I usually load my 223s at 22.3 grains with this powder, and best I could find it was off. It was 22.2. 1 point of a grain isn't going to hurt the performance of your gun one way or another. It's just not. That's why I go in the middle when it comes to my reloading chart. I don't go to the very bottom, I don't go to the very top, because I'm not hunting. I'm just target shooting with my son. So until he gets comfortable with shooting and he learns the ins and outs of the rifle, these are things that we do as, family here. He's already learned how to assemble and disassemble the AR, take it completely apart, clean it, put it completely back together, because you have to clean those things after so many rounds. He's gotten really good at it. Not very many 16-year-old kids know how to do that. I'm really proud of that boy. He's really good at what he does. Kids today are so interested in video games and social media, they don't care to do this stuff anymore. And if we don't teach these things to our boys or our girls, they'll never know it, and it'll be a dying hobby or craftsmanship or wherever you want to classify it as. You get sidetracked and you forget to put a primer in it. Okay. I'm going to recheck my powder thrower just to make sure that it's still where it needs to be. No, wrong one. Up, down. Yeah. 22.4, so it kind of went the other way, a part of a point. So what I'll do, which is fine, up, I'll turn the scale off, let that sit there for a second, put my primer in, up, primer's in flush. These have little funnels on them. You can literally put your case in there and tip it up. And it's already loaded. Pretty neat little trick. Put your projectile on the top, up, up. And there you go. I've measured, I've checked. You always inspect your cases to make sure there's no splitting or cracking in the case, because you don't want that to happen. You don't want to reload that and fire it through your gun, because that could be bad. I try to keep my videos pretty short and sweet. That way you try to get as much information out of it as you possibly can. Let me clean it off. And there you go. A 223 loaded at 22.3 grains. If this video has helped you in any way at all, and you like this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel. I put out new content once a week, usually on Saturdays. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to respond to your questions if you have any that you need. Thanks for watching my channel, and y'all have a very blessed day. Thank you.